Hello, my grots and gits, and welcome back to another episode of Happy Crumpin' War Gaming. Today, we are going to start the journey down the pathway of the orcs because the green boys are here, and I cannot tell you how freaking excited I am to really dig into this codex. So, if you attended our live stream, I had Boss Cooper on the screen with me, and we went through a full tier list of all the orc units. Now, that tier list was awesome. And if you haven't watched, I would start there because we do a really comprehensive review of basically every single unit in the codex. Now, what today is I'm going to be talking about all of the individual attachments and how we're actually going to be running them, and how I'm going to be ranking them based off of their relative strengths. I will actually, in the coming week or two, will be releasing an individual video on each individual detachment. So we're going to get really in depth on all of these, but I encourage you to start with that tier list if you haven't checked that out. And now for the rest of the video today, let's go ahead and rank the detachments, and we're going to talk about why, and I'm going to give you some starter ideas about how we're going to be running these. That's going to keep you satisfied until tomorrow you get the very first detachment focus video, which is going to be all about one specific detachment, and we're going to learn to really, really crush people, or crump, as we are bringing the green boys into town. So let's hop right on into it. 6 amazing, I say, detachments for the orcs. When I say amazing, that's what I mean, all right? There is actually not a bad detachment in this book. There's just not. There is a subpar detachment that is still totally playable and totally usable. I just doubt we're going to ever go see it win a super major. But that doesn't mean it's a bad detachment. You've got 2 detachments that are like, that are okay, that can definitely go to a GT, go 3-2, even go 4-1. They might struggle to win a GT, but they're 100% viable. And then there's like 3 very, very good viable options for a top level competitive that could be taking out these super majors. So let's jump all into them. Real quick, what is one thing that all of these detachments truly have in common? Well, this is just orc strength in general. We have very high OC. We've got very high explosive damage output, just generally due to the nature of our army rule, which is the wall. And then we're going to have a ton of bodies that can be put into like multiple different units. So we have a great action economy. So those are just generally true for pretty much all detachments. So now we're going to start with the number 6 detachment, and that is the Cult of Speed. I know I'm going to hear some people who are disappointed when I say this, but listen, they're number 6. That does not mean they're bad. As a matter of fact, I actually am cooking a list on Cult of Speed that I think is actually going to be quite nasty right now. They have a lot of play. It is still a good detachment, which is why I love this freaking book so much. It is a stark contrast as to the book that was released simultaneously as this one. GW just did a great job writing this one, even though they did a trash job on the other one. But this one, they smashed it. They did freaking awesome. And one of the really, really cool things is I don't think this codex is overpowered either. Like, all these attachments are relatively balanced. When we get to the top ones, we might talk about a little balance that needs to happen. But for now, let's do Cult of Speed. This is, in my opinion, the weakest detachment in the book. It's still a good detachment. It will allow our Speed Freaks units to advance, fall back, and shoot. Now, this right here is what I think kept it from being a very good detachment, right? Had they just said, orc units can advance and shoot or fall back and shoot, I would have been like, this is a solid darn detachment. I'd be dropping Morkanauts. Heck, honestly, I might even take a Stompa if that was the case. But it's not. So let's focus on what we actually have. Now, what is my favorite stratagem in this codex? I like the sustained hits stratagem, and the name of that is going to be the Daka Storm, which is a very appropriately named stratagem. Effectively, what this will let you do is you will get to target one Speed Freaks unit, and that's one of the things about this particular detachment. Everything is focused on Speed Freaks units. And you're going to be able to just give them sustained hits 1 in shooting. That is bananas good. Bananas good. And then if you're within 9 inches, you get sustained 2 on that unit. And that is a blast. So now my particular, immediately, instantaneously, my brain goes to, I want units of 6 Death Coptas. You guys might giggle, but now that we're in Speed Freaks, those Death Copters get to advance and they shoot their rocket launchers. They get to fall back and shoot their rockets. They get to advance and shoot their rockets with sustained hits too. So you can get 6D3 blast, sustained hits 2, twin linked rockets. That is bonkers powerful, and that's only for 200 points. This also means you get to advance the Copses, which lets you proc their ability a lot more. And then you get to stack it with a really awesome stratagem, which is going to be the Speediest of Freaks, which says one speed freaks or truck unit from your army that was selected as the target of one or more attacking unit attacks. Guess what? You get a 4-up invulnerable save. A 4-up invulnerable save on the unit. So a lot of people, when they're looking at speed freaks, are really going to be focusing and thinking about buggies and how this helps buggies. But no, buggies are awful. They're still awful. This doesn't really help them. They still suck. But Death Cops has become bonkers good in this detachment. And don't forget, there's another really cool stratagem. I guess I should have written more on here. But there's move more gets over here. One speed freaks unit from your army that is within 9 inches of an enemy unit that just ended a normal advance or fallback maneuver. You get to make a normal move up to 6 inches. This is very strong, especially with units like Death Cops, which, depending on how closely they move to the unit, you can maybe even move over them and back and just proc your mortals again. So there's just a lot of really cool utility. You can actually take a DACA jet here as well. A DACA jet, if you can finagle how to get a mech to give him +1 to hit, he gets sustained hits naturally on all of his hit rolls. So if you give him +1 to hit, he hits on 4s. All 4s from the DACA jet become sustained hits. And then you have a stratagem that will give him lethals. So he can get sustained and lethals on 4s with his, 18 shots of super shooters, which suddenly makes a DACA jet actually usable, even though DACA jet's actually still terrible. So the strengths. We get unreasonably strong Death Copters. It will enable the use of several weaker data sheets, such as the DACA jet. And guys, the return of truck boys or truck knobs, as they will be in my army. They get out of a truck after the truck has moved. This is an enhancement that you would put on probably a war boss. And then they still get to charge. Effectively, you put that enhancement on a character, and they make the truck count as a land raider, giving it assault ram. More or less, that's what happens. But now, what are the weaknesses of this detachment? Well, we've got no support for our already strong units. So the units that you're really encouraged to take in orcs, your knobs, your mega knobs, your boys, all these things, there's no real support for them. So you're just kind of encouraged not to take them, which is an interesting route to go. It encourages giving up max bring it down points, because the second you start to, like, my initial brain, by the way, I'm going 18 Death Copters in this detachment. Seriously, 18 Death Copters? That's only 600 points. I'm very happy with that. I'm also guaranteeing my opponent will score 20 points and bring it down when I do that. So it does encourage giving up secondaries, and that's kind of a weakness. It has very little melee threat. Now, there is a cool stratagem that will give us +1 to wound when we charge with a Speed Freaks unit, but it's not that much. And then lastly, and this is the one I talked about at the very beginning, it is sadly locked to Speed Freaks. So this is Cult of Speed. This was number 6. It's actually a good attachment. I like it a lot. And when we go through it in detail, I think you're going to see some really cool things. Let's talk about number 5, the Dread Mob. Now, this is one that when I originally saw all the original Huff about, I don't know, all the original pageantry about, I was so pumped up. And unfortunately, James, Games Workshop just kind of missed the mark here a little bit, I feel. When they got rid of Grot Tanks, that really limited the ability of the army by quite a bit. They also have some of the stratagems which are just... Oh, you know what? Let me go to the next slide and we'll talk about these. All right. They also had some of the stratagems are going to be limited, which is kind of weird. Like, for example, they have a -1 damage stratagem, which is fantastic, but it only applies in the shooting phase, which is pretty horrible. Well, it's not horrible. I mean, it's still very usable, right? But it definitely makes things a little bit tricky, right? It says your opponent's shooting phase so that does make things a little interesting. Anyway, this is a solid detachment. It is not a bad detachment. I will put a little caveat here. In Dread Mob, you're likely going to struggle on WTC style terrain. Just by the nature of moving robots is not easy. Now, some people will say, oh, but Imperial Knights move fine on GW terrain, or I'm on WTC terrain. Well, that's true, but then you're moving individual models that have moved 12. In Dread Mob, we're moving units of, say, like Killikans, which is 6-mans. They're all on 60mm bases, and they're all only moving 6 in. It's going to be very, very hard to actually maneuver this army on WTC. On GW terrain, it's going to be actually quite darn good, because GW terrain is a lot more forgiving for moving around buildings and stuff. So for me personally, I'm probably running only Dread Mob only on GW terrain. I'm not bringing it to WTC style terrain. That doesn't mean I hate Dread Mob. There's actually quite a bit of good stuff in here. So your favorite stratagem, what's your favorite stratagem here? I like the -1 damage in shooting, because honestly, if you have a Morkanaut, and yeah, Morkanaut's actually usable here, and You give it, it's got its invuln. You have a mech there to start healing it, to start buffing its shooting. Dude, that bad boy is going to be pretty hard to take down with -1 damage. That actually changes things quite a bit. One thing that Felix and I were talking about on the live stream, if you are using some of the abilities of Dreadmob to really boost up the shooting of, say a Morkanaut, don't waste your time shooting your like big shooters, because if you do, you'll take an extra hazardous roll for like no reason. So just don't do it. Anyway, what are the real strengths of the Dreadmob? We have very hard shooting in Dreadmob. Like very hard shooting. Like when you stack all of the buffs, you can get a unit of 6 kilocons, 6d3 blast, potentially +1 attack each, and they're all going to be at +1 to wound, and they're all going to be at +1 damage. It is actually bananas the amount of just output that we can put into it. There's also a really sneaky like Luda unit that is actually shockingly good in Dreadmob specifically, but we'll talk about that in the deep dive video later on. They also have reactive Grots, which is really, really cool. You also have the ability to take a Def Dread and actually turbocharge him in melee. I'm still uncertain on that because Def Dreads are still ridiculously overpriced, but it actually creates the option, which is cool. Weaknesses. The encouraged units, like I said, are very hard to maneuver. It's not easy to move these massive units of vehicles. And also, once again, you're giving up max secondaries. And you also have no points reductions on the overpriced and underpowered units, such as the Def Dread or the Knots in general. So that's Dreadmob. I like it. It's really fun. I think I'm going to be running it on GW, but I won't run it on WTC. Number 4 is the Big Hunt. The Big Hunt is our really, really exciting and awesome Snagga-focused detachment, and I like it. I think this is going to be one of the ones that people are really overlooking in the beginning, and let me give you some of my thoughts on why. So, my favorite stratagem here is you get advance and charge outside of the WA. Now, when you are using this stratagem to be advancing and charging, and let me just read the name of the stratagem to you guys so you know what I am talking. Oh, excuse me, I skipped over it. You do have to declare the prey. And if you don't know what the prey is, essentially what happens is at the beginning of your turn in the Big Hunt detachment, you will declare a monster, a vehicle, or a character unit as your prey. And that unit you'll get all your Snagga units get to reroll charges against it, and they'll get +1 to their AP. Which, by the way, if you have not seen AP2B Snaggas, which is a huge strength, which I have written down here, you have not freaking lived. AP2B Snaggas is a heck of a freaking drug. And that, my friends, is pretty disgusting. Yeah, okay, so this stratagem, it's called Dat One's Even Bigger. Your charge phase, 1 Beast Snagga unit from your army. Until the end of the phase, your unit is eligible to charge in a turn in which it advanced or fell back, provided one of the targets of the charge is your prey. This is extremely strong. Now, I do think it's a little silly that it's linked to the prey, and I think that's a very easy balance thing that the GW team can do in a future FAQ. They just say, 1 CP, you get to advance and charge, fall back and charge. That's not an overpowered stratagem. It's something that other factions actually have access to. Limiting it to the prey is one of the reasons why the Big Hunt is actually further down on the list. If they had that like just unrestricted, as it probably should be, I think you're going to see this detachment doing even better. But it is a solid darn strat. It really does force your opponent to really consider how they position, because they're used to measuring out the Orc's threat range. Well, you only move 6 inches, but then in the wall, you get the... So it really screws up their gameplay. Anyway, what are some other strengths that we have in the Big Hunt? Well, suddenly you get really, really reliable charges. Like I already talked about the AP2 Beast Snaggas, right? We get a damage 3 Beast Boss, and because of an enhancement. It's called Propakili. Now, when we take this damage 3 Beast Boss and we combine it with the fact that that unit is going to be re-rolling hit rolls against monsters and vehicles, and you have a stratagem to give yourself sustained hits 1 on that unit, or sustained hits on 5s if that target is your prey, which a lot of times it will be, then you realize, oh crap, I've got anti-monster vehicle 4 up, and I have dev wounds with damage 3. This becomes disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. Effectively, this entire detachment is made to focus down tough opponents with ease. You focus down the unit that is not supposed to die, and you just crush it. You just smash it. And you also get some pretty cool movement shenanigans. You get the ability, like, if they fall back, then you can follow them up. You also have the ability to pick up a unit and put them back in strategic reserve. Uppy Downy is a very strong ability in this game. And what are some of the weaknesses? Well, sadly, hogs, meaning Squig Hog Riders, are fairly weak in the game right now. They've just been nerfed into oblivion when you couple with points, and then the fact that now since they can no longer have a knob on smash a squig leading them, they lose the ability to get +1 to hit. It really does actually hurt them quite a lot. So hogs are quite hard to use. I am probably taking one unit, and I'll explain how in my focus video exactly how I'm going to do the big hunt. But yeah, so some of the units that you really want to take with this, like kill rigs, hunter rigs, they still suck. A kill rig, by the way, I think is usable in this detachment. And but I'll talk about the list I'm going to use with it in the focus detachment video. Anyway, let's move on to number 3. Number 3 is the Green Tide. Now, this is one that a lot of people are arguing is one of the best detachments. And I'm not so sure. I'm not sold. I do see a lot of potential with it. But I also see some pretty cool, big pitfalls. So let's talk about Green Tide. This is a super interesting detachment, and a lot of people have been begging for it, especially in the orc player population. My personal favorite stratagem in this army is like a combination of an ability and a stratagem. So Green Tide has a stratagem that allows you to move after you've been shot. And let me just read it to you. It's called Go Get 'em. One boys unit from your army that was selected as the target of one or more of the attacking unit's attacks. After the attacking unit has shots, you can make a Go Get 'em move. To do so, roll 1d6, and each model unit can move a distance in inches up to the result. But you must move as close as possible to the closest enemy. It basically turns them into corn berserkers. Now, if you have 10 models in that unit after the shooting has been resolved, then you get to move a flat 6. This is a very big deal. So what I'm envisioning, and I'll go a lot more in detail, in this detachment specific video for Green Tide, but I'm really just initially imagining, give myself a unit of 20 boys with a weird boy. Turn 1, I'm going to teleport him 9 inches away from my opponent's deployment zone, and I'm going to stretch him all the way out. And obviously 9 inches away from enemy models as well. Not just the deployment zone, but just... or I guess the deployment zone doesn't matter at all. It's really just 9 inches away from enemy models. So I'm going to teleport them using the Weird Boy's ability, 9 inches away. And then my opponent can only move 3 inches in his first turn. Because if he moves closer than 3 inches and he shoots that unit of boys, I'm going to reactive move into engagement with them, because the stratagem allows you to move into engagement, which means he won't be able to move anything else for the rest of the turn. And he also won't even get to charge me, which is going to be really brutal for him. So I think it's really, really powerful, and I do think there is some good play. I think there's some big issues in it too. So what are the strengths? Well, they have mad OC ability, because they get to regenerate orc boys. So there's a stratagem to give them D3 plus 2 boys back in the command phase. And then you can stack it with a pain boys ability to once per game give you D3 boys back. So they can be regenerating orc boys constantly. They also get the 5-up invuln constantly on the orc boys, which is okay. They get regeneration for allowing them to steal objectives. They get to manipulate primary scores. You get to screw up your opponent's game plans a ton. But there are some serious weaknesses for Green Tide as well. They have 0, and I repeat, 0 kill ability. So a big orc unit of 20 orcs, okay, sure, they're going to get 80 attacks at strength 5 AP 1 in the WA, but it's still 80 attacks at strength 5 AP 1. Yes, there's a war boss, there's a knob, but honestly, that doesn't really do a lot to a lot of units in the game. I just run some Terminators into them and be like, cool, bro, armor contempt. You killed 2 Terminators and you did nothing. So I can really, really see this this detachment struggling. It doesn't have damage support, which means you're going to have to be taking Gaz and Mega Knobs or normal Knobs, which is going to take away from what the detachment wants to do, because all of the stratagems only support boys. There's still a lot of play, but I'm not sold on it being the best. Now we're getting into the top 2. The Bully Boys. Yes, I know this might be a shock to a bunch of people, actually, but I rate Bully Boys as number 2, not the best attachment. Let me explain why. This, in my opinion, is the most overhyped faction. However, it's still freaking incredible. I'm not saying that it's not a very good faction. It really, really is. But it is super overhyped, and I do not think that it is anywhere near as busted broken as people think it actually is. Now, I will admit, I believe Mega Knobs probably need to go up by approximately 5 points. They probably need to go up to 35 points. They are a little bit cheap at 30 points per model. Now, what's my favorite strat in well, if you don't know what the special rule in Bully Boys is, the special rule is that they get to declare the WA twice. The second time they get to WA, it only applies to War Boss units, Knobs, and Mega Knobs, which means, yes, you can have a Beast Boss on Squigosaur who has the War Boss keyword, and he's leading Squighogs. Squighogs would benefit from the Wa a second time. So it does allow for some really cool flexibility in list building. So I think it is a very interesting detachment. Now, what's my favorite stratagem? Oh, my favorite stratagem for this detachment is called cut them down or cut them down. One Nobs or Mega Nobs unit from your army within engagement range of an enemy unit that is selected to fall back. When that enemy unit falls back, all models must take a desperate escape test. When doing so, if your Wa is active, subtract 1 from each test. Effectively, if you're in the Wa and for 2 battle rounds you'll be in the Wa, models that fall back from you will die on a 1 through 3. Now, this only applies to one enemy unit, but how disgustingly strong is it if you tag, say, a unit of Hearthkin? Hearthkin or Hearthguard. Hearthguard, if you're playing Votann with a unit of Nobs. And they're like, cool, 1 CP, I'm going to fall back and shoot. And you say, cool, 1 CP, half your squad just died. It's a game changer. It's very, very powerful. There's lots of other really great strats as well. But we'll go in detail once again in the detachment video for them. But what are the big strengths for this detachment? You have ridiculously hard to kill Mega Nobs. Because those Mega Nobs get a Fort Field of Pain during the Wa, which means you'll have 2 battle rounds of the game where your Mega Nobs will have a Fort Field of Pain on top of a 2-up armor save, on top of potentially AOC if it's in shooting, on top of potentially a 4-up invuln against shooting. And if you have big mechs leading them, they're resurrecting. So there is a lot of survivability in this list, which is different for Orc players. They also have very generous CP efficiency because all their strats are 1 CP, which is generally true for the whole Orc Codex, by the way. But yeah, so they are a horde to kill army. And Gazgul Makarg gives his lethals for 2 battle rounds because it's real damn strong. So very, very good value out of Gaz. Now, a lot of the weaknesses with this army, and this is something that I'm concerned about. It's very points intensive, so it means there's a lot less unit activations than we are used to as when we play Orcs. So it's really going to have some struggles into Hordes because Mega Nobs, if you're taking Twin Kill Saws, you get 2 attacks each, bro. Not that many attacks. Yes, I know you're in the Watch twice for 2 battle rounds, so you get 3 attacks on those battle rounds. But Mega Nobs are not efficient at killing lots of bodies. It's also going to be the lowest OC of any of the detachments that we see because Mega Nobs are only OC 1. Meaning a lot of times you could just say, I don't know, advance a unit of trash onto an objective, not charge the Mega Nobs, and then your opponent, the Orc player, just doesn't score primary. So it does have some weaknesses. There are ways to play around with that, and we'll talk about that a lot. But yeah, so that is Bully Boys. They are my number 2. I think they're awesome, but I don't think they're busted broken. And then the War Horde is, of course, number 1. War Horde is the index detachment. Now, I did see a couple interesting slides from some other content creators that were a little misinformed. So we're going to correct that right now. Let me read a stratagem to you. Let me explain how beautiful these stratagems are. There is a stratagem in the index that was absolutely useless. It was called Mob Rule. It has been dramatically changed in the index. Let me read it to you. Mob Rule. When, at the end of your command phase, target 1 mob unit from your army that contains 10 or more models and is not below half strength. Effect. Select 1 friendly battle-shocked Orcs infantry unit within 6 inches of that mob. That infantry unit is no longer battle-shocked. This is very powerful. The stratagem used to only apply in the smallest, most niche scenario ever. However, now Orcs have access to a stratagem that can just go, you're unbattle-shocked, which means you don't have to spend a CP to auto-pass battle-shock. You can allow your unit, you can roll, see if they fail, and then unbattle shock them. That is critically powerful. On top of that, we have lots of new things. But basically, my favorite strat, of course, it's Kareen, but Kareen's unreliable. So my favorite strat is still Art as Nails. You get crazy value out of -1 to wound in this game. So I still freaking love it. I think it's incredibly powerful. But let's talk about some of the strengths of this detachment. We have ungodly, insane damage output. Your Gazgul Makarg gets unbelievable output here. Remember, Gaz's unit, the unit he leads, gets critical hits on 5s, which means all game long, they are getting sustained hits on 5s. That is exceptionally powerful. Oh, actually, I'm sorry. Forgive me. That only applies on the turn that he casts a Wa. So on the battle round that he declares a WA, he gets critical hits on 5s. But guess what? You have a stratagem in the War Horde called Unbridled Carnage, which does what? It gives you critical hits on 5s. So during the WA turn, you can get 2 units getting critical hits on 5s. And if Gaz is nearby, he's giving lethal hits to both. So you can get both Gaz's unit and a separate unit, say 10 man of knobs, that are both getting lethals and sustained hits on 5s. That is exceptionally powerful. The damage output is through the roof with this. A beast boss with Snaggas will kill any vehicle in the game when you do that. Knobs slaughter nerds. Mega knobs get a glow up here. The War Horde is a powerful place to be. Now, the weaknesses for the War Horde specifically, they've got no shooting pressure, which is generally true for a lot of these detachments, by the way. And they are susceptible to move blocking, which is also generally true for all orcs. So, but they don't have any extra weaknesses. War Horde kills anything and everything. It's still fairly tough with the addition of your Mega Knobs and things like that. It still has access to the Artisanal Stratagem. This is a beast of a detachment, and I think we're going to see pretty amazing things with it. So, this is going to be the end of my video. If you like this information and content, hit the like and subscribe button, share it with your friends. Remember, I am coming out with a total series of individually detachment-focused videos where we're going to go through stratagems, we're going to go through tactics, we're going to go through strategies, we're going to go through unit selection and list building for each one of these detachments individually. It's going to be deep dives, and we are going to master the art of the crump. So I'll see you in those videos, and until next time, peace out. Crump on. Bye.